You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com. Bitcoin, Ether, Ripple, Litecoin, and more. Cryptocurrencies and other digital assets are taking the financial world by storm. This exploding market provides everything a savvy trader needs: volatility, volume, and liquidity. Provided you know how to find it. That's where we come in. Welcome to the Crypto Rundown. Each week, we'll break down the latest trading activity, trends, and developments on everything from coins to tokens, futures, and even OTC options. If it's moving the crypto markets, then you'll find it on the Crypto Rundown. This program is brought to you by Genesis Volatility, also known as GVol, home of institutional-grade crypto options analytics. Whether you're trading CeFi options or DeFi options, cryptocurrencies move. Use GVol Analytics to analyze implied volatility, model realized volatility, structure positions, and unlock alpha. For more information, visit gvol.io. That's GVOL.io. Now it's time to dive into the exploding world of cryptocurrencies and digital assets. It's time for the Crypto Rundown.
All right, everybody. That music means it is time once again for the Crypto Rundown, the program where we break down everything going on outside of our traditional realm of, let's say, your Apples and your Teslas and your VIXs and all those other fun things in the traditional world of options, and peek over the other side of the fence into everything going on in the world of crypto derivatives. Going to talk the Bitcoin, the ETH, the futures, the options, the spot, the vol, the skew, the OI, all that good stuff, and a whole bunch more. My name is Mark Longo from theoptionsinsider.com, as well as, of course, from the ever exciting, at least we hope so, Options Insider Radio Network. And, you know, we say it all the time, but it's really important for a show like this where so many newcomers discover it from outside the traditional world of options. It's very important. If you're not subscribed to the whole network, listeners, you should do so, because a lot of you are coming in and I probably don't have the firmest of grasps on all things going on in the world of options. So if any of these terms we're throwing around today, like skew or OI or any of this other stuff, are confusing to you, make sure you check out our educational content we have hitting the network and a whole bunch of other stuff to really get you up to speed in the world of options. If you like what you hear, keep rating and reviewing. It really does help all those new folks discovering the show these days. And let's get right into it. No hot seat today. No time for it. We got to dive right on into the meat of the action. It is time for the Bitcoin Breakdown.
It's time to explore the latest trending activity, trends, and developments across the world's leading crypto market. It's time for the Bitcoin Breakdown.
All right, everybody, let's get to it. Bitcoin Breakdown. Man, a lot going on in the altcoin as well. We'll get to all that fun and ETH and all sorts of goodness in a little bit. But let's start in the big dog, Bitcoin, the one that brought many of you to the dance and the one that is still dominating the OI out there and dominating the volume, even though that dominance rate starting to change a little bit as ETH continues to pop up there in the rear view mirror. Speaking of popping up, it was pretty much an upside week for most of the major crypto assets you folks like to watch, including Bitcoin. End of our last show, we were shy of the 55,000 level, about 54,252. Coming into today's show, just a tick, half a buck under the 58,000 levels, 57,999 and a half when we kicked off the show. Puts it up near about 3,750 points, or pretty close to it out there. We've seen it, of course, get as high as flirting with, not quite getting to, but flirting with the 60,000 level. Got to about 59,000 ever so briefly out there. Of course, also saw it drop down to about 56,000 intra-show period. So a lot going on here over the course of the Bitcoin landscape. But you guys are here for the vol and all that fun stuff. Of course, if you want access to all these analytics for yourselves, you know where to go. GVOL, GVOL.io. That gets you to Genesis Volatility. They're doing all this cool analytics stuff out there right now. So if you want info on how these things are trading, the skew, the vol, you're really limited in where you can go to learn this stuff. So check it out for yourselves if you want to learn more. GVOL.io is the place to go to kick the tires and light the fires. If you do that, you'll find metrics and analytics like this, like the 1 hour volatility. Where else can you get 1 hour vols on underlyings outside of places like crypto and Bitcoin? Remember, for a while now, our narrative has been, can Bitcoin vol continue to languish in this mid to low 70s level? And the answer is yes. In fact, it can drop even lower. Last show, it was at a 71%. And coming into today's show, it broke the 70 handle, 69% coming into showtime. So this narrative of the Bitcoin volatility erosion is continuing. When we do see vol spikes, they are short-lived, which if you've watched the metals at all of late, that is kind of reminiscent of how the metals have been working from a vol perspective of late. So is Bitcoin becoming more of that digital gold? Certainly from a vol perspective, that argument holding a little bit more water right now. Is it going to languish here for a while? Are we going to see another big move, big pop that's going to drive it up? And will the vol stay at those levels? These are the questions everyone has on their mind right now. We've been asking that now for over a month here on the show. And so far, the answer is still yes. In fact, it can drop lower. Let's look at the skew out there, see how much evolution we're seeing out there. Remember, they measure skew a little bit differently over there in the crypto space. They look at the 30-20 skew. Usually you're looking at a 50 delta risk reversal. You're looking at a 25 delta call and a 25 delta put. They do it a little bit differently in the crypto land for a couple of different reasons. First off, liquidity not still really there the way it is in, let's say, your Apple and your Tesla and your SPY and your VIX out there. So you can't just take one call each. So it's much more meaningful to take a bit of a strip. And also it's a little bit more informative too to see what's going on with a full strip, a full section of options versus just one strike. And looking at that 30-20 skew, last show was about a 1. This show up a little bit, up to about 2.3 coming into the start of the show. In terms of OI, this is where we're seeing some of the more dramatic swings because April went off the board. Since our last show, listeners, took a lot of contracts with it. Remember on our last show, we had Bitcoin options at about 203,000 contracts open. A lot of those went the way of the dodo over the course of the past week. Now come into today's show, we saw a little bit of that coming back. 165,000 contracts right now in Bitcoin land. In terms of notional OI, we're seeing, again, a similar story as April took a lot of that notional OI, notional value of those options positions. With it, we had about 10 billion worth of notional open on Deribit on our last show. If you added up all the venues, it got to a little bit north of 11 billion. Now we're down about $1 billion from that this week. So you're seeing about 9 billion open on Deribit. You add up all the rest, you're a little bit north of 10 billion. Looks like it's actually, that fight is heating up yet again for second place because you got LedgerX, CME, and OKEX all right around each other across the venues here as the fight heats up for really third place out there right now. But interesting stuff afoot here in the overall notional. It's fun to see these other venues start to come online. Still waiting for Huobi. They got about 1 million worth of notional right now. But CME, LedgerX, OKEX, and even Bit.com all kind of fighting neck and neck right now, which makes it kind of fascinating to watch. Of course, they're all still pale second places to the big dog, which is Deribit. But hopefully we see some regulatory progress here. We had the folks from TMX on our interview show last week, the Montreal Exchange, and they, of course, have approved some Bitcoin ETFs to start trading in Canada. There are now options trading on those. So the hope is that we might see something similar here in the U.S., and that's really going to open up the floodgates. And then, of course, people can trade options on that Bitcoin ETF and put them in their traditional securities account, which would be so much easier than having to deal with wallets or trying to tunnel in with a VPN to trade on Deribit, all the things people have to do here right now. Let's look at it from an OI perspective. Let's break it down a little bit further. Let's look at the calls versus the puts. Remember, for a little while there, puts were getting pretty much neck and neck with the calls. April came off the board, took a lot of that paper with it. Right now, calls are back in the lead. 89,000 contracts open. That's down over 25,000 contracts from this time last week. Puts are down to 79,000. That puts them down about 13,000 contracts. So about 10,000 separating the calls from the puts right now. But it's still a pretty close race out there. If we do see some more shocks to the system out there, that's going to drive that put OI up quite a bit yet again. And let's talk about how much notional volume has been trading out there. Let's look at the big dog out there, which is Deribit. And, you know, we were seeing some pretty active days on our last few shows. Talked about pinning the needle at about 2 billion with the notional multiple times. Not so much this past week. You got about half of that on the tape. The busiest day was actually April 30th with about $1 billion worth of notional going up on the 30th. So about half of what we were seeing out there of late. But again, got to take a break sometime. Took a little bit of a break over the course of the past week. We'll see if we can get back up to those 2B levels coming up in this coming week. Let's go to the monthly expirations. Where are you folks lining up from an expiration perspective out here in Bitcoin options? Of course, the big dog was April. That went off the board this past week. That took 68,000 contracts with it. Probably actually more by the time it expired. That's just how many were open on our show last week. So that means June is now the big dog with 49,000 contracts. That's up about 5,000 from last week. May is number 2 with about 39,000, up about 10,000 from last week. And we got Dees bringing up the rear with about 25,000 out there. So quarterlies, folks like themselves a quarterly. That's still the case for right now, at least in Bitcoin. Although given a lot of the near-term interest we're seeing in Bitcoin right now, I do expect May to crawl its way up there and claw its way up to get to the number 1 spot by the time we see the end of the month here. You guys are always fascinated. You want to know where people are lining up from a strike perspective. What do they have on right now? Again, April kind of didn't wipe the slate clean, but it did change things up a little bit, except for our number 1 spot. The number 1 spot is still the 50,000 strike with about 14,500 contracts open on. Of course, that's in the rearview mirror now. It's more of a hedging strike than it was the optimistic upside strike not too long ago. Number 2 is the 60,000 strike with about 13,500 contracts open. That's down nearly 2,000 contracts from this time last week, but still enough to hold on to the number 2 spot. Number 3, the 40,000 strike, about 11,000 contracts open. That's a newcomer to our top 5, so we don't have the change from last week. Number 4 and number 5 are some of the strikes you're probably more used to, some of the more quote-unquote outlandish strikes. Number 4, we got the 100,000 strike. That's down to about 8,100 contracts. It's down to about 1,300 from last week. So obviously some people had some April par calls on, which, spoiler alert, we didn't get there by April, listeners. Number 5 is the 80,000 strike. That's got about 7,500 contracts. That one got annihilated pretty aggressive. That got pretty much cut in half. There were about 15,000 contracts open on the 80,000 strike last week. So April going off the board showed us April 80,000s and April pars. There was a fair amount open on both, but obviously a lot more on the 80,000 strike. We'll see now if some of these more, shall we say, optimistic strikes fall out of the top 5 as we start to see maybe more relevant strikes, maybe a 65,000 make its way in there, or if these are going to continue to dominate the imagination. They certainly do seem to be capturing people's attention these days, but we'll see if that 80,000 strike, if that can continue to hold your fascination throughout the month of May. Let's go on out to the CME land. By the way, all of you out there who have been asking, and pretty much since launch, you have been asking, hey, what's the deal with the size of this contract at CME? It's too freaking big. It's 5x an underlying that is already closing in on $60,000. Outside of massive institutions, who the hell needs that? You've heard me ask this of CME many times. When are you going to have some sort of smaller bite-sized contracts? I asked it of Tim McCourt not too long ago on our TWIFO program, which, by the way, if you're listening to this show, listeners, you should definitely be listening to This Week in Futures Options. We break down crypto every now and then when it actually does come on the radar over there at CME. But today is a day I think you're going to want to pay attention to what's going on over there at CME, because today is the day they finally listened to me. And by me, I really mean you. It's you folks who have been asking for this since the end of 2017. A smaller, more bite-sized future over there at CME. Today is the day. Micro Bitcoin futures alive and well over there at CME right now. So what are we getting with these micros? If you've been paying attention to anything over there at CME, you know that small is big. They're all over anything. The micro futures that they've launched on equities have been pretty much the surprise hit of the decade over there. People can't get enough of those. It makes sense. They would want to replicate that and get this contract just in the hands of more retail players. Right now, a retail player just can't sling a 5X. It's just too much. So this is going to be 1/10 of a Bitcoin. They didn't go down to 1. They went to 1/10. So there you go. Keeping it nice and small, nice and bite-sized. So that's going to be nice, too, to see some more retail flow start making its way into the CME products. And a lot of people still are concerned. We were just talking about crypto options on our Options Bootcamp program with Dan Passarelli, and he brought up once again the counterparty issue, the clearing issue. That is still a big concern for a lot of people who are coming from the world of traditional options. If you hit a home run on your options position, if you bought the 10,000 calls back 6 months ago and you want to cash them in now, you want the other side of that trade to be there. It's very important. So CME clears these. So you don't have to worry about CME going the way of the dodo. So for a lot of people who are reticent to dive into the crypto options waters, this could be a game changer. And of course, for a lot of our audience, speaking of game changers, I know what you want. You want the options. So it's coming. Next time I have Tim on, which I think might even be this week on Twifo, I'm going to ask him again, when are we getting the options? They're going to demur, do all the things that they normally do. We can't talk about future contracts. But they're coming. They're launching this. They're keeping an eye on this with the goal of launching the options. And then it's open season for all of you out there. You don't have no more excuses. You don't have the size of the underlying. You don't have the clearing issues. You should have a much more deep and liquid marketplace out there. And you could finally get in and start slinging it. I guess maybe you could still take issue, with the Bitcoin reference rate that CME uses. But at the end of the day, you're kind of running out of excuses at this point. So good to see this finally launching. It's going to pave the way for the options. I'm excited. Hopefully you are excited. Looking at the options right now, CME getting a little bit of a boost, I think, just from the approaching onset of these contracts. So we're starting to see more paper on the big 5X contracts. We saw 137 of them going up on Friday. Again, that's not Deribit numbers. Before this contract's actually a lot. 127 on Wednesday. So last week, again, one of the more active weeks, if not the most active week we've ever seen yet again from a crypto options perspective on CME. Futures, decent week as well. About 15,000 was the most active day we saw out there. I won't even bother with the backed volume bot. We love them, but the numbers on backed right now, not so much. 809 contracts as of this last summary. Instead, let's keep on rolling. It is time to get out to the crazy lands. It is time for the altcoin universe.
It's time to move beyond Bitcoin and find out what's moving the rest of the crypto marketplace. It's time to boldly venture into the altcoin universe.
All right, everybody. Welcome to the altcoin universe. Man, what a universe it has been over the course of the past week. We'll get to all of that. First, let's break down the top 10. Standard caveat applies. Watch out for the overall market caps, but the rankings are interesting. Number 10, we got a newcomer here on the top 10. This is VeChain, VeChain here, ticker VET, VET. Number 10, that has 13.7 billion worth of market cap. Number 9, Bitcoin Cash, 19 and about a half here. Number 8, Litecoin, still fighting its way into the top 10 this week, 19.7 billion. Number 7, Polkadot, 35.1. Number 6, Cardano, 43.6. Number 5, probably anticipation of the big Musk SNL appearance. Dogecoin on the rampage yet again at 40, almost 41 cents out there right now. Good for 52.7 billion worth of market cap. Just if you are slinging Doge, and I'm not going to be the get off my lawn guy, but just by all means, make sure you listen to that listener question. Maybe go read that article we talked about on the listener questions last week. We're talking about how a handful of wallets control pretty much most of Doge. So just bear that in mind. It's already a joke currency. On top of that, it's got a handful of people, maybe even Musk, we don't know, really controlling this whole thing. So just keep that in mind if you're putting the kids' college fund in Doge. XRP getting back up there as well, up to about $1.59 or 72 billion out there. Tried to get some XRP on Kraken a little while ago. Surprised to see you can't get it on Kraken anymore. That's kind of the whole reason. That was one of the big drivers for Kraken early on, was being able to get access to XRP. At least right now you can't, which was disappointing to me because I wanted to pick up a little XRP and was denied. So there you go. A lot of you out there probably feeling my pain out there. Number 3, Binance Coin, coming in at about a 103.5 out there. Number 2, you know what it is. It's ETH. 379 billion. Number 1, the big dog, Bitcoin, at about 1.08 trillion. Still sounds crazy when I say it out loud. But yeah, the story of the week, listeners, has to be ETH. On the Rampage, on our last show, was at about 2,500 even. Had dipped below that really briefly down to about 2,100. I'm sure a lot of you are wishing you scooped it there now. Coming into today's show, almost 3,300, 3283.91. These are just levels ETH has never seen before. It broke past 3,000. Again, that alone had it quadrupling in value so far just this year. So ETH been on the rampage, got as high as 33.18 just in the past 24 hours. Just staggering runs here in ETH. That puts it up, yeah. So far, these levels right now, 325% for the year. Comparing that to Bitcoin, which has also done well, that's a comparatively paltry 95%. So ETH, definitely the driver's seat this week. I know a lot of you out there love yourselves some ETH. A lot of our guests have been very active in the ETH and its attendant ecosystem out there. So I know that comes as very welcome news to a lot of you out there. Let's break down the vol. Again, you can find all this vol analytics, everything else. Same place you found the other ones, gvol.io. They have a lot of ETH going on over there as well. If you did that right now, you see the vol is actually up in ETH, and go figure, we're in uncharted territory right now. It usually should drive a little bit more vol out there. Last show, the vol was 84%. Coming into today's show at about a 92%. So a little bit more vol creeping up in ETH. Will this be sustainable? Again, if it keeps hitting new highs, it's kind of hard to fault it. 30-20 skew, big change out there. A little bit shy of 6 on our last show, is about a 584. Come into today's show, 1375. So a big swing out there from a skew perspective. Again, we're seeing crazy new all-time highs pretty much all the time out there. So kind of hard to fault them as well. Volume-wise, what is surprising is that we did kind of see, it was kind of a quiet week until today. Today was the big day of the week by far. Coming into showtime, there was already 930 million worth of notional paper on the tape over there at Deribit. Pretty much another new high out there in Deribit land. We were talking not too long ago out there about new highs of 395 million, 300 odd million out there. Now we're hitting new highs of close to $1 billion out there on Deribit, which again just shows how much attention has now shifted towards ETH. So we were talking about a new high on April 15th of 448 million. That was a lot of paper. Today, already double that. So big day out there in ETH. A lot of folks starting to turn their attention towards ETH land. Let's break down some of the OI. Remember, ETH tends to have bigger peaks and troughs when it comes to OI. They have huge buildups and it kind of comes off pretty aggressively. So let's see how April and going off the board impacted ETH. Remember, ETH's a little bit more quarterly focused as well. So that should maybe help with this a little bit, but a lot of contrast came off the board in April, listeners. The calls right now, 760,000 open out there on the call side. That's down 60,000 from our last show. The puts, 690,000. That's actually up 80,000. So as we're moving into uncharted territory, go figure, some folks want to hedge their 3x to 4x gains out there, putting on some puts. So puts actually up, even though OI got annihilated over the course of the past week. That in and of itself is pretty interesting. Again, overall OI, last show about almost 1.4 million. We have seen these new highs, like I said, has attracted a lot more paper very recently. So that has helped to mitigate some of these losses. So coming into today's show, we're at about 1.36 million in terms of total OI. So the losses not as bad as they were at the end of last week, as people are continuing to flock in and open new positions as a result of these new highs out there in ETH. Overall, notional value of the OI out there in ETH land. Again, we saw a month come off the board, so usually that'll take a lot with it, and yet we actually are up on the week. Last week was about 3 billion worth of notional open in ETH land. Right now it's about 4 billion, so gaining about $1 billion right now. And again, We're seeing about $1 billion worth of notional changing hands already today, so on Deribit. So folks are flocking into ETH, I think is the moral of the story. Let's look at the overall months. Like we said, ETH loves a quarterly, and that still is the case. June is number one with 436,000 contracts. In fact, it's funny, most of these are actually up on this week, which is kind of interesting given the fact that we saw a lot of OI vanish. Some of this OI is June up 46,000 contracts from this time last week. So a lot of folks are piling into ETH, and clearly they're diving back into June. May is new on the board for us, about 240,000 contracts. You got actually Dees coming in at number two, actually taking it out with 252,000. Dees is also up about 18,000. So June number one, 436,000. Dees at number two, 252,000. Then May bringing up the rear at 240,000. If you were wondering, last week, April actually was number two with about 318,000 contracts. That's all gone. But as we've seen, ETH is rapidly making it back up. Know what else is interesting? With April going off the board, we're starting to see some more relevant strikes come into the conversation from an options perspective, which is nice to see. I mean, I guess you can put relevant in air quotes because they're kind of outlandish in the other direction. But at least we're not just talking the 400 strike anymore. The number one size strike right now in ETH options. You ready for this, listeners? The 5,000 strike. There are now 71,000 contracts open on the 5,000 strike. Most of those coming fairly recently because that has outpaced the 400 strike, which is number two, was number one for a long time with 63,000. That number hasn't changed. And the number three is the 320 strike with 62,000. That number hasn't changed. So the 5,000 strike roaring into the number one spot this week in ETH, listeners. This is kind of analogous to not that long ago when we were looking at people loading up on the 30,000 strike in Bitcoin. We were saying to ourselves, that seems like a pretty difficult road to get down, and yet they made it. Can we do something similar in ETH? Clearly, 71,000 contracts out there saying we might have a shot. Again, there could be some overriding there as well, but we know if anything in ETH land, just in crypto in general, a lot of the call activity tends to be a little bit on the optimistic side. So I'm going to go out on a limb and say a lot of that 71,000 contracts is folks wagering we're going to get there by the time of expiration. The number four strike in the top five in ETH right now, the 3,200 strike, with 61,000 contracts open in the number five open position out there right now, the number five sizable position, the 3,000 strike. So these are much more relevant with 55,000 contracts open. So it's not just the 400 and 320 strikes anymore, even though they're still there. Whoever has those open is still open for size. Let's keep on rolling out here right now. Look at some of the other altcoin that are taking up your action. Ripple up about 26 cents. Again, a good run here for XRP if you can get it. More challenging of these underlyings to get out there these days. Bitcoin Cash up about almost $200 exactly, $199.69 since our last show. Bitcoin SV up about $105 since our last show. Dogecoin, like I mentioned, up 14 cents since our last show. All the madness, all the love for Doge. Let's go really quickly now before we wrap up a little bit of your crypto questions.
You've got questions about crypto. Who doesn't? It's time to find out the answers to your crypto questions.
All right, everybody, welcome to the crypto questions. This is the portion of the show where you folks get to ask us your questions. Sometimes we turn the spotlight back on you like we are doing right now. If you guys haven't followed us, I know most of you do. If you haven't followed us, at Options on most of your major social media platforms. So if you head on over to Twitter at Options, you'll find this very fun poll up there right now where we're asking you, quite simply, if you had to buy a 10% out of the money call, remember that's above the at the money strike, so the underlying has to rally 10% for that call to pay off. If you had to buy a 10% out of the money call that expires at the end of the year, December 31st, in one of these different underlyings, which one would it be? And we gave you four choices. The VIX, so overall equity volatility. The S&P 500 could be any flavor you want. Could be the SPX or SPY or some other flavor therein. Or Bitcoin or crude oil. And right now, again, it just went live before our last show, so it still is early days, but it will still be live by the time you folks get this podcast in your hot little hands or in your hot little ears, whatever the case may be. So you can get on over there to at Options, make your voice heard. If you want to vote for Bitcoin, we didn't have a chance. There's not enough room to put ETH and everything else in there. We kind of had to go with one. Right now, you'll be happy to hear, though, Bitcoin is tied with the S&P 500 with number one, both of those with 35%. Number two, crude oil, 25%. And bringing up the rear, no love for it by the end of the year, is the VIX with only 5%. All right, listeners, that music means I have to get on out of here for this week. But don't worry, a lot more content hitting you throughout the rest of the week. Interview Tuesday, tomorrow, Education Wednesday, Double Dose, Options Bootcamp, Options Playbook Radio. Again, if you're just listening to this show, if you're new to the world of options, you definitely need to be listening to Options Bootcamp, Options Playbook Radio. Speaking of listening, by the way, we've had some people write in saying they have our app and they can't get the crypto rundown through the app, either on iOS or on Android. We have checked. That is indeed the case right now. There is an issue with our app provider. They are working on it. It should be fixed. So by the time you hear this, hopefully you should be able to access the crypto rundown again through our app as well. All of our shows should be available on the app. So if you can't get it, hit us up, let us know. We are working with the app provider to get that sorted out. So you should be able to get access to it. In the meantime, if you want to get access to all the archives, you can always go to our website as well, in case you can't find it on your platform of choice. So again, check out the app. Check out those educational shows on Wednesday if you're new to the world of options. Options Bootcamp, Options Playbook Radio. 2 great shows to get you up to speed. All these things we're talking about here on the show and a whole bunch more. Then, of course, we're back again next Monday with another episode of the Crypto Rundown.
This program is brought to you by Genesis Volatility, also known as GVol, home of institutional-grade crypto options analytics. Whether you're trading CeFi options or DeFi options, cryptocurrencies move. Use GVol Analytics to analyze implied volatility, model realized volatility, structure positions, and unlock alpha. For more information, visit gvol.io. That's GVOL.io. You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions@theoptionsinsider.com.